Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. A very fun week of Test cricket. In the end, England beat Sri Lanka after the visitors gave them a late scare at Old Trafford, while Bangladesh beat Pakistan for the first time ever in a Test match at Rawalpindi. England also have a new 20-year-old bowler who averages more than 50 with the ball in first-class cricket in Josh Hull. We'll be talking about his selection later in the show as well. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Phil Walker and Ben Gardner. Mark Butcher will be with us later. Phil, there were a couple of points where Sri Lanka gave England a real fright yesterday, in particular when Chandimal and Mendis were in together, when they dismissed Pope cheaply in the run chase. It was a really spirited performance from the visitors, especially considering their combined start of 7 for 5 across the two innings.
Yeah, 6 for 3 inside the first half hour, and you felt like it was on the wall immediately. That said, massively commendable for performance, and if it wasn't really for that kind of brain fade really on the third morning, when they let Jamie Smith get away from them and they were far too passive in the field, and it was all a little bit shambolic, players forgetting certain pieces of kit, and the whole thing felt like an afterthought for an hour or two. But you take out that mini passage of play and they stuck at it, and they gave England a proper good run for their money. And they've needed that, England, because it's been slightly one-sided summer really up until that point. West Indies had one or two mini windows, but I think Sri Lanka have been the story really. And while Smith is a great good news story, good feel-good story for English cricket, no doubt, but we knew that was coming, and we saw it after about 10 minutes at Lord's on his debut. But the real story, as you say, has been that knock by Mendis, whose first-class record is extraordinary. He averages 66, I think, in first-class cricket, and from a decent sample size as well, and has already made waves in his short Test match career up until now. And just as you had that warm glow when you saw Hodge make 100 for the West Indies in the second Test at Trent Bridge, so you had a similar feeling seeing Mendis go to a really, really classy, old-world orthodox kind of 100. And it was actually a surprise when Gus Atkinson got a bit of wobble with a newish ball, and they'd been utterly untroubled with the new ball up until that point, and he just managed to hold one up around the wicket to the left-hander, and he nibbled at one root, took the catch, and then the innings fell away a little from there. But at that moment, considering as well that the pitch was starting to be a bit more up and down, and the outfield was weirdly lush and long, so a lead of, I think it was about 170 at that point, was more like a lead of 220 really. And at that moment, before that wicket, you felt, my word, something is on here. And if they could have got up to 250, with a bit of luck, if they could have got a lead of 250, they'd have won that cricket match. As it was, it looks comfortable enough for England. But there were moments, even in the run chase, when it was broadly a 50-50 game. And even after it looked like they'd broken the back of it, Root still got a very marginal LBW that went his way when he was too far down the track, but the ball was taking leg stump out the ground. And again, if that had gone Sri Lanka's way, then there was still a bit of work to be done. And look, it would have been a rousing, stirring result for the world game if they'd managed to pull it off. As it was, it's an encouraging game for them in the here and now, but for the rest of the series. Yeah,
I definitely think Sri Lanka, we bigged up their batting before the series. They've got 6 guys in the top 7 who average more than 40 in Test cricket. The other one is Kusal Mendis, who has shown flashes of brilliance over the years. And on the bench, they got Patham Nissanka, who's had a very good start to his Test career. And I think you saw, especially with Mark Wood off the field, England looked a bit flat and short of wicket-taking options, and we've seen very flat pitches in England over the last few years, and Sri Lanka are a much better place to threaten the England bowlers than West Indies that we saw early in the summer. Ben, on paper, it's a really good Test match. It felt close in periods, but it also felt very flat in periods. It didn't feel like a brilliant Test match, even though it actually was on paper, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess so. I feel like because of that start on the first morning, and also obviously there's the 6 for 3, but then there's also the Bashir one that crawls along the floor, where you're thinking like you're worrying about the pitch, and at that point people are just, I think Sri Lanka had been written off at that point, and it maybe took people a while to realise that there was a game on. So at that point it felt flat for parts of day one because of that. It was like, oh, this is sort of a bit fun, but didn't expect them challenging at the end of that. And then at the end of day two, you thought there might be a game on, but on day 3 it was Sri Lanka who kind of didn't realise there was a game in progress. You know, he's trying to start the bowling with a bowler who wasn't allowed to bowl at that point because he bowled the first over the previous night. And I do, as much as this was a spirited performance and they, you know, came back so well from that first session and that first sort of 20 minutes. And in some ways it does set the series up well, but I also wonder if they'll look back at this as their missed opportunity in some ways. Like, I'm not sure if they'll get a pitch that suits them or doesn't suit England to quite the same degree.
I thought that was overplayed by England, by the way.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it didn't actually spin that much on the final day, and pitches in England have been slow and flat for a few years now. That is a normal test match pitch in England with slower outfield, sure, but I thought there's a little bit of excuse making from England at the end.
Yeah, that's true. But then also, I guess the other factor in their favour was Mark Wood being injured. Like, actually, that was the other thing on that day 4 was that with them having, you know, put that partnership together and Mark Wood off the field, and we knew he wasn't going to come back and bowl at that point. But actually, if they do get through that new ball period, then, you know, Phil says if they could have said set 250, they could have won that game. Whereas actually, it felt like, in a weird way, they were kind of 20 runs away from making 300 because of that partnership sort of blunts that new ball. And then they also had the lack of fortune with that ball change as well, which angered Angelo Matthews.
Yeah, he said that changed the whole momentum of the game.
Yeah, and said that the ball that was the replacement ball, the umpire said they couldn't find one of the same age as the ball that was replaced. And also, he was annoyed because the issue was that the ball, it was going through one ring and not the other as it should have done, but it was the seam was a bit bent, and he was saying like, well, the seam's bent because we've been playing good cricket and hitting it. Like, we shouldn't be punished for that. So
it's an interesting point of view. Certainly, it feels like cricket being infuriatingly silly that you can't have broad replica balls available, right? You would think at a test match you would have a ball that could broadly look like and act like a ball within 5 over intervals, right, across the 80 overs that a ball is allowed to be used for. You would think that wouldn't be beyond the wit of the umpires, but we saw it obviously last summer. Infamously, we saw it here at the Oval, where there was a split screen of those two balls, and one was sort of dog-eared bit of rubbish, and the other one was shiny, rouged, and menacing. You know,
I've more optimism than you for Sri Lanka because yes, Wood wasn't available on the 4th morning, but he's not available for the rest of the series either. True, England will replace him with someone who is not Mark Wood. And even though Gus Atkinson bowls quicker than Wood, that was probably Atkinson's toughest period as a test match bowler, bowling against Mendes and Chandimal, who batted very bravely after taking that nasty blow to his hand against Mark Wood on the previous day.
And this Kamindi Mendes, I mean, what a story this could be. I mean, because, you know, you look at that, take that pinch of salt with that his first go in Test cricket when it was 200 in his first 3 games, and you're thinking like, well, okay, but it's, you know, it's against Bangladesh and it's spinning conditions, and we don't really know anything about what he can do against you know, the moving ball and the faster ball, and he looks like he can just play it pretty comfortably, you know, and it kind of all stacks up. I think if he had that same career record and he had come into an Indian side, you'd be looking at him and thinking like, oh wow, here's, you know, an absolutely brilliant player who's ready to, you know, to dominate for a long time. You know, not saying that's definitely going to happen, but this was a brilliant 100. It's a mark of also of how good that Sri Lankan top 6 that he kind of is down at 7 and will actually probably stay there, because I don't see how he slots into that top 6.
And Nasanka's not in the team. Sri Lanka do have a lot of batting, so I think there are lots of positive signs for Sri Lanka. Just want to touch on a couple of other Sri Lankans. Prabhat Jayasuriya bowled 2 beauties in the first innings, sort of from nowhere. We didn't see that much more turn as the game progressed, and I really like Asitha Fernando as well. Not particularly tall, not particularly athletic, but caused England problems throughout, and picked up 6 or so wickets in the game,
and bowled some beauties as well. The ball to get rid of Pope in the first innings was a Jaffa, hits the seam. He reminds me a bit of Philander with an extra yard. You know, has real control over that seam and cants it slightly and gets a lot of movement. Deserved everything he got. They were generally across the board a very watchable team and a promising bunch as well, as you say. You know, there is depth to that batting. I'm still surprised that Nissanka didn't come into that side. He didn't play the warm-up game either. Kusal Mendes is mercurial, as we all know, but again, 2 failures for him, and he didn't get runs in the warm-up game either, so perhaps they might look to shake things up there potentially. But I think it sets the thing up quite nicely. Could we deviate? And could I ask you about substitutes in cricket? Because I was thinking about this over the weekend, and I know this isn't my kind of subject, right? But it's been bothering me since we sat and watched the Surrey-Essex game here. And this is not parochialism, right? But if you recall, on the morning of that game, Jordan Cox...
So this is top of the cable clash.
Yeah, so
this is billed as the Festival of Red Bull Cricket.
All of that. Yeah, and it literally billed as that. And, tried to break records for the number of punters coming through the turnstiles. And they built the thing up for 2 months. Festival of Red Bull Cricket. On the first morning, Essex's best player complains of pain in his abdomen. Doesn't get any better. By lunchtime, he's in real discomfort. By the end of the day, he's had his appendix out in a London hospital. Obviously, he's out on his back for the rest of the game. Don't see him for a number of weeks after that. He's still in pain now. So Essex played that whole game with 10 men. They lost the game by about 140 odd runs, something like that. And their best player was removed immediately, and they played with 10. There's a number of other of those examples, but that's just the one that stuck in my mind, watching that game and commentating on that game and thinking, this is just fundamentally unfair. On a certain basic level, it's fundamentally unfair. I'm not sure it would exist in other sports. I'm not sure it does exist in other sports. And then it struck me watching this game just now. Remarkably, Chandimal's finger thumb area wasn't smashed to bits, and he could come back and play beautifully. But you could see the way it was shaking, and you assumed he was out of the game. Mark Wood, as it turned out, was the one who was removed out of the game, and so England were bowling with one less bowler. But Sri Lanka, for all money, looked like they were going to be going in with one fewer batters than normal. So I ask you, in the age of the concussion substitute, in the age of that sensible and workable policy that nobody disagrees with, and everybody recognises that it's fair and progressive and necessary, why can we not extend this to substitutes for clear and obvious and clearly provable injuries?
I totally agree. I guess the only question is, how do you regulate it? With a concussion test, you have a set test that a medical professional undergoes on the player who's been hit, and it's that is how it's done for everything. Whereas I guess for other injuries, the worry is, will teams game it?
Yeah,
but I fundamentally agree, though.
I agree as well. I think you just have you can have an independent medical adjudicator in general. The other thing as well is, I actually think if you keep it to a like-for-like replacement, the opportunities for gaming it are not that obvious, because
right.
if someone was going to improve your team, you'd have picked him in the team to begin with, kind of thing. And
go on, sorry.
And just the oddity, especially with the Cox situation, is that you can still get replacements for COVID-19 as well. So he's obviously had his appendix out, and more serious. But if they stuck a swab up his nose and he failed an LFT, then they'd have been able to replace him.
Right. So to me, it's riddled with inconsistencies, as cricket is want to be anyway.
No, it's a fair point.
I just can't really understand it, and I wonder if it gets to a point where perhaps you, with a touring squad, you name your replacements before the game, mm-hmm. right? So you have a reserve opening bat, and so he or she is the reserve for the first 3 batters or whatever. You have a reserve spinner, he or she is a reserve for that spinner, and so it's not a case of you whipping out a quick because he's knackered and bringing in a spinner because the pitch is turning. You nominate your substitutes beforehand, and for the home side, well, you keep a squad of 13. Why not?
Yeah, I think if the Cox thing happened in a test match, I think there'd be quite a lot of clamour for it, because that was the most extreme possible case, because Cox did nothing that game. Essex literally played with 10 for the entirety of that game. Ben, did we see further signs of refinement for England in their method? Root took nearly 100 balls to score his first boundary in the run chase. Brooks struck at less than 50 in the run chase. It seemed that they adapted to conditions. Phil mentioned the longer outfield, so it was a very slow outfield. Do you think England are batting slightly more smarter than they have been in previous times under Stokes and McCullum?
Yes, to an extent, and you can certainly point to those two, and to Jamie Smith as well. There'll be some people who think hang on, Ben Foakes has sort of been dropped because he can't play in the Spencer manner. When we yet to fully see that from Smith, even though there's been a greater range of strokes, but the tempo he's played with has been perfect for the situations in which he's found himself. I suppose the only example of there not being that refinement is actually from their captain for this game in Ollie Pope. With that second innings dismissal in particular, it's so clear that Sri Lanka are basically, playing on ego there and playing on temperament and saying like, look, we want you to reverse sweep this, and we think you're going to get out if you try and do it. And so, how much of kicking it away or waiting for a ball that's slightly in the wrong place for it would Pope have had to do before Sri Lanka had tried something else? I don't know, but in the end he takes it on pretty much the first opportunity and then toes it to slip, and on another day England lose that game, and then Pope's first test as captain has ended in defeat in large part because of a shot he didn't need to play. So but yeah, in general there has been a bit of fun. This also wasn't the pitch for that. I think you're right about the slow pitches, but this was maybe slower a little bit, and I guess maybe Zach Crawley not being there, maybe he sets the tone a bit more. But I think in general over the summer it hasn't been quite as crash bang wallop as we've been used to, and that's been a bit of enjoyable relief, I guess.
Pope.
Sorry, before we get to him, we've got an email on Pope, and
Okay.
I'll put that to you before you go. This is from Anonymous. They didn't want to put their name to it. Not a question, but a discussion point. If Pope had played that second innings shot, batting 3 for a club team, there's a strong chance his teammates would be filthy at him. He's failed first innings, England are in a tricky chase, and he's just played a shot that says either I don't care enough to really dig in, or the pressure of chasing 200 on a featherbed against an ordinary attack is too great. In either case, England need to look to move on from him before 2025. Frankly, I'm stunned that a player who grew up watching Sangakkara and Amla at Surrey under Alex Stewart could be so irresponsible given the match situation. In reality, his average of 35, by the way, Marnus averages 49 after a similar number of tests, is only padded out by the occasional large 100 against weaker opposition. Now, I think that's slightly harsh. Pope doesn't view that reverse sweep for one as a high-risk shot.
Mm-hmm.
But I was really surprised when England, it wasn't just Pope who played that shot, by the way. Pope, Root and Brook all looked to play the reverse sweep against Jayasuriya in that little period. And I just couldn't believe they were all playing it because Sri Lanka had a man back, deep third. This is for one. But I do think that we're about to see competition for places in the top 7 that is fiercer than it has ever been before, at least in the last 15, 20 years of batting spots. And it is interesting, Phil, because England have really invested in him over the last few years, and his record under Stokes is really good. He averages pretty much just under 40 now since Stokes took over as captain 2.5 years ago, which number 3 is very good going. But it does feel like there is still unrealised potential there, and given he's about to play his 50th test match in a few weeks' time, how long do you keep going with someone who has unrealised potential? Or do you accept that actually the returns have been very good, even if they're not as good as you might want them to be, you still persist with that player?
Yeah, you used the word unrealised potential. It's a better word than what I was playing around with, which is unresolved. His test career, to me, doesn't yet prove the Pope story. It's not irrefutable yet. You feel like there are one or two other players of his time. I'm thinking of Harry Brook in particular, where there's provable evidence of his test match class. With Pope, there are pockmarked moments. There is more evidence, I think, than the chap in the email, perhaps. Although I can understand that there is a double 100 against Ireland, for example, that perhaps pads those stats up to a point. But there's also some significant hundreds. There's hundreds away from home, the 135 he made at Port Elizabeth to get himself going. Obviously, the remarkable 196 at Ahmedabad. He's made some runs around the place. He made 100 in Pakistan as well. But what those hundreds are surrounded by is what it remains of the question about Ollie Pope, and especially struck me yesterday watching that run chase, especially in run chases, 4th innings run chases. Now, England under Stokes have made that their specialty. But Pope, with the exception of Leeds in 2022, where he made a good 80-odd in a run chase where Bairstow then took on the mantle and Root was Root and immovable for 80-odd not out, and then Bairstow smashed it for a quick 70, and they got home quite comfortably in that game that they were up in through most of it. It was the game where Jack Leach took 10 for, and so he made a good 80 in that fourth innings there. But I think after that, his next best score in the fourth innings is around 20 or 25 or something.
He hasn't made above 25.
Hasn't made above 25
And that's
in
from
the fourth
17
innings.
attempts.
Yeah, he's played 47 test matches now, so it's a decent sample size. And yesterday it felt, perhaps with the captaincy on his shoulders, perhaps it was a trick of the eye, right? As you say, it's a shot that he's played very well across his career overall, but it looked like it was the frenetic Pope that we sometimes get, and it felt like an unnecessarily risky shot to play to a bowler bowling left arm over into the rough stuff with an offside field anyway, and it was his undoing. In order to make some final decisions on Pope as a Test match player, we need more evidence of him making really tough runs. And by that we mean third innings runs, fourth innings runs, and there's no evidence, or not much evidence of that as it goes. His average against Australia is low. His average against India is low.
Yeah, so against those two teams, he averages 22 from 18 Test matches. Which
And
is a
again,
significant
18 Test matches is not a
size.
small sample size.
Yeah.
Now, those Test matches are spread out across a few years. He made his debut, of course, against India quite a few years ago now.
And he didn't get a chance last summer to
Indeed.
show if he had improved against Australia because he got that injury early on.
That's right, and he would have been a key man you fancy in that summer. He was unfortunate to be attached to that disastrous overseas Ashes when his technique was a bit mangled by the end of it, as indeed were a lot of England players. So he's not had it easy against the big two, but nonetheless they're the barometer, and that's just how it is now. They are the teams by which you measure your success or otherwise as a Test match player in the round, in the fullness of time. We're nowhere near the fullness of time yet with Pope, and he's obviously showed more than enough in the gaps to suggest that he can crack it. But he is an unresolved Test match player.
But how do you see it? Because, part of me thinks, well, he averages nearly 40 at 3.
Wait, no,
over the last 2.5 years.
averages 43 at 3. So I think
I think there are a couple of weird innings in that. Since Stokes became captain, I think he averages 39 point something.
Yeah.
Very good record, especially considering England's recent history at number 3. No one else wants to do it. That's a very good record.
Yeah, so I'm reasonably comfortable with him there for the next little while. I think there was pressure on him at the start of the summer. I think if he'd had a good series against West Indies, if he hadn't, I think you'd be looking at, I suppose, Jordan Cox as well. Obviously Dan Lawrence too, but Jordan Cox is in such scintillating form. It feels like almost he is the coming man in some ways. But the thing for me is, it is just that starting question. I remember a piece you wrote a little while ago, Yas, but looking at percentage of scores below a certain number, I think below 25, that number in the chase as well. And Pope is basically England's worst starter out of anyone. And I think there's sometimes comparisons made with Joe Root, but the thing that makes Joe Root world class and one of the best has ever been, the thing that he is best at is coming out and immediately getting to grips with the situation. Not everyone's going to be able to do that. That's fine. Like you're not Joe Root. You're someone else. And if you're bad at starting, just like I think, and if we were looking for refinement from Bazball, the best refinement I think would be was to say to Ollie Pope, for 30 balls, you're not allowed to play a shot. Just block it, get your iron, and we know that after that, you're a really, really good player.
I hear that, but there are patterns to how he's been getting out in recent times, and he is bowled more than you should be comfortable with for a top order player. Mm-hmm. And Sky did a montage of showing him being clean bowled, where he gets stuck on the crease. Mark did a very good technical analysis of it. And he spoke about how he gets closed off with his left shoulder. And it was a familiar problem that he had back in that Australia series that we talk of, where the hips and the feet were misaligned to where the shoulders were. And so he would get in a tangle and the weight would start to fall over. And he was bowled around his legs in Australia. But you were getting that sense. In the first innings, he got a really good ball. Don't get me wrong, it was a really good ball. But again, he got trapped on the crease, and he's falling over in that shot. And it's sometimes just a tendency that he gets slightly misaligned. He's tinkered around a lot with his technique in the years that he's been an England player. And I think that reflects on his his curiosity, right? He's an interesting thinker on the game. It's one of the reasons why he's skipper now. But he's just got to possibly just iron out a couple of these things. And the Root comparison is a good one because Root's not always been technically watertight, right?
Falls over, gets OBW.
Exactly. And Root against Cummins in particular in 2019, post the World Cup, was getting found out a bit against Cummins, as Root says himself. Had to figure out how to go about it, start again from scratch, in effect. And he did that over that winter in the end. So there's plenty of time for Pope, and when it works, he's a fabulous player to watch, and he's made some important hundreds that provide a solid body of evidence. But there's just not enough yet to be completely at ease that he's the long-termer at 3.
Well, I think the other aspect of it is we mentioned Jordan Cox a couple of times in the show. I think England rate Cox in a similar way to the way they regard Jamie Smith. Jordan Cox this week played a totally ridiculous 100 in the county championship against a very, very strong Hampshire side, struck it quicker than a runner ball. And I think
the point is there's so much talent, right?
Yeah.
And the game moves on very, very quickly now. You know, you can throw various names out, but, Ben McKinney, for example, made a brilliant 100 this week. He's just a teenager. I'm not saying that he's part of the story for another 2 or 3 years, but they come at you quickly. And the competition for places is intense now.
And it also, because England's top sevens is pretty well established, it means that guys who are getting opportunities and added to squads for the first time in the batting department are getting there when they're more established in their own game. Whereas, the Pope Crawley generation, they were getting their call-ups after 5 minutes of playing professional cricket because of how much that England top order was struggling at the time. So when someone like Smith or Cox comes into it, these are guys who are right at the top of their game and dominating bowling attacks and are used to doing that, and have sort of ironed out problems in their game before they get under the microscope of Test cricket. We've not talked about Jamie Smith yet, player of the match for England. Ben, how good is Jamie Smith?
Almost too good in that, if you were just a little bit worse, you could just plug him in at number 7 and be like, fine, that's it, we're kind of sorted there. As it is, I think we're set for, years of him creeping up and up the order until, that workload becomes too much, then he slips back down or maybe someone else comes in for a couple games and then it will begin again. But yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. And in a way, I sort of mentioned it earlier, but I think what's almost impressed as much as, some of the strokes he's played is just the head he's got on him, that he just looks obviously so at ease at this level, but also and again, we talked about refined baz, but just refreshingly happy just to play the situation as it is, not to go into a shell, but just to bat normally. He's not asserting himself in the situation. He kind of, I think, and that almost being at ease feels the same thing, doesn't it? He doesn't feel like he needs to come and be like, I'm Jamie Smith, I'm England's Test wicketkeeper. He's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm going to play as I have done, for a few years now, and that's going to work now as it has done before. There's no need to do anything different.
Yeah, he just seems completely unbothered to me in a really good way.
Yeah, but also not sort of diffident or detached. We gave a lovely interview, I thought, at the end of the game yesterday afternoon, and he's clearly smart and bright, but he's quite warm with it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you get these young cricketers and they've been media trained to within an inch of their personalities, but he's got a lovely combination of sort of inner steel and confidence, but he's got a nice way about him as well. Joe Harmon interviewed him for the Current magazine and came away saying, he's just a lovely kid, but he's much smarter than perhaps you see from a distance when you see another young and coming through. He's classic captaincy material, folks. Classic captaincy material. And obviously that's not a story for a number of years. Just let the kid play. But he is a remarkable talent, and it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out, because we've seen him now for the last 3 or 4 years. But here it goes for him. He's already going to be a Wisden Cricketer of the Year, even if he blobs up from here on in. Is it 2 balls out the ground, literally, in his first 6 weeks as an international player, and peels off a beautiful 100 to get himself already in the record books, right? Not too many players have done what he's done already in his short Test match career.
Yeah, since the Second World War, only David Lloyd and Harry Brook have scored more runs from their first 5 innings as an England Test player. I think he's so good, and even just comparing him to, obviously there are so many. When you see a new player come in like this and they do really well.
The comparison is Gilchrist is the comparison, I think.
Well, I was going to say, when you get a player like this coming in, you instantly sort of wonder, how's he going to go in Australia? How's he going to be on a dust bowl in Sri Lanka, that sort of thing? And those are questions that we're still yet to see. You think he'd have a pretty good shot, given what we've seen so far. But, even comparing him to Brook, who literally averages 60 in Test cricket, there's a rash shot in Brook where there's a moment of madness almost. There was one in the first innings where England were in a little bit of trouble. Sri Lanka were bowling dry. They had a 7-2 offside field. So Brook just thought, okay, scoop. And he doesn't get hold of it at all. And he's very lucky not to get out. There is none of that in Smith at the moment. And Smith still, he's striking at 74. He's scoring very, very quickly without taking these risks. He's very comfortable in his own game. And I'd say, again, comparing him to another youngster in the team, so Ollie Pope, for example, very solid defence. Very, very solid defence and very comfortable in it. It's a very uncomplicated technique and one that he really trusts. Very, very positive signs. I mean, you say Gilchrist. I think he's more of a classical batter than Gilchrist. I think he's someone who I would be very surprised if he isn't batting in the top 5 for England in 2 years' time.
Yeah, and you're probably right. And someone else will come in and keep because he's too good to keep. What I'm talking about is that discernible change of tempo, and England have had some very good number 7s, but they've never had a number 7 who should be a number 4 before that I can think of, and he is simultaneously a sort of tempo game changer and reliable all at once. Gilchrist averaged 50. You've got to remember that. Gilchrist averaged 50. He's changed the complexion of this England team.
Ben, what did you make of Matt Potts' return to the side?
Interesting haircut.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Gardner? As a purveyor of interesting haircuts.
I'm not into appearances for critters, so it was sort of worrying to start with, I suppose. It wasn't the spot on Matt Potts that you'd remembered from that amazing first summer as a Test cricketer, but I think he sort of settled back into it a bit, and by the end, you were remembering what England like about him. I think in some ways him and Dan Lawrence put in the perfect sort of replacement performances, and they came in, chipped in, but didn't do enough to give England a headache when that first string comes back. But he's I think, and we talked about Smith's sort of mentality and personality. I think Potts in some ways is cut from a similar cloth, and that he'll work hard. He'll be realistic about when his opportunities are going to come, what he needs to work on, that kind of thing, and he'll get better. So I thought he did okay, and it could easily have been had let it get down him, having had that amazing first summer and then basically not getting a look in since then. But after a not great start, did okay.
I thought he bowled really well actually at the start of the second innings. He struggled a bit in the first innings for sure, and there was a notable drop off in the first innings in pace and intensity. But I thought he bowled really well in the second innings. He's a good squad seamer at the moment, and that's fine, I think.
And I think he's actually put on a bit of pace since we saw him in 2022 as well. Is the odd ball that's 87 miles per hour, which is significant. He's not going to be express pace ever, but I think if he can maintain speeds closer to 86 than 82, and I think we saw it in the second innings. He's got the potential to be someone who bowls long spells and able to keep it dry. I know he didn't start well in the first innings, but actually looking at his overall figures across the game, I think he recovered well. A couple of other questions on England players. Phil, first impressions of Dan Lawrence, the England opener? He must have loved it when he saw Dananjaya de Silva take the new ball on the first evening.
He'll be cranky, Lawrence. 30 and 36, I think. 230s, isn't it? 230 somethings. And two pretty limp ways to go, and characteristic ways to go. The indeterminate prod with half a bat outside off stump because he's compulsive and he wants to find runs wherever he can, and missing a straight one, trying to work it through square leg mid wicket, and they are his two technical fallibilities. Before that, he played nicely, played fine.
He played one of the most ridiculous shots I think I've ever seen off Jai Surya in the second innings, when Jai Surya just hung a ball way outside off stump and he whipped it through square leg. It wasn't even mid wicket.
Yeah, no,
square leg.
Even in a test match.
And then
even
5
in a
minutes
test
later,
match,
he missed a straight one from Ratnayaka, who's bowled 78 miles per hour seam up.
Yeah. He also clubbed an enormous 6 as well off Jayasuriya. So look, he's always watchable, folks. He's always a thrill. But nothing in that test match disabused me of the sense that whatever future he has as an England player, it's not as an opener. But I'd love to be proved wrong. I would dearly, truly, and people say that all the time. They don't mean it. I'd really mean it here. I'd love to see it. And I don't know what your next question is, but I can't resist. I'm not going to say the bloke's name, but the message we got from 2 or 3 days ago. Could we read that out?
I can't remember what this is.
Just discovered your weekly podcast and loved it up until you turned to politics. I don't use X. I have no interest in using it, but I didn't turn the podcast on to listen to your political views. You are cricket journalists, not political commentators, so please stick to the subject in hand. And here it comes, Ben. You like this bit, don't you? I absolutely hate it when so-called celebrities patronise us with their political opinion. I don't tell you mine. Got no interest in yours. But your cricket content was the best I've heard.
Yes, two bits to pull out from that. One, so-called, what was it?
So-called celebrities.
I was delighted with that.
How does that label...
Well, you probably think celebrities is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I think so-called is doing the heavy lifting. Yeah, thanks for that. Well, I can see your chap's name anyway. Yeah, thanks for that. Keeps us honest, keeps us on our toes.
I take the compliment. Best cricket content out there.
That's it, up the workers. Anyway, where were we?
Crowds weren't great. Genuinely, really, really quite poor. Even Saturday, first of all, you had the oddity of it being a test match that overlaps with the bank holiday weekend, but started on a Wednesday. So day 4 was Saturday. That was the final day in the end. But even on Saturday, you had empty stands. Party stand wasn't full. Empty seats throughout the test match. That is not a good sign.
Yeah,
we suppose, one of the things we keep saying on the show is, oh well, people still turn up for Test cricket in England. They didn't this week.
Yeah, and the Wednesday start, obviously it looks mad because why are you not playing the bulk of that? Why are you not starting on a Friday, going through so you get cricket on the bank holiday Monday? Obviously no chance of that even if we've gone to 5th day. But like the issue with it is how condensed test tours and schedules are, right? If you want to play 3 back-to-back tests and you want scheduled play on every weekend day, you don't have an option to play it on a Wednesday. Start on a Wednesday, the first game.
You could start Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
No, but then you need 3 days back. If you want 3 days rest between each game, then you have to, and you have a 3-test series, and you've got to go Wednesday to Sunday, and then Thursday to Monday, and then Friday. Oh, so getting playing on a Friday as well, I guess, would be the other thing. So unless you want to start testing on Saturday, which I suppose you could.
Well, I don't understand why we don't.
Yeah, I guess
if you start on the weekend, that means you get 2 days in the weekend.
That is true. Yeah, even if it's 2-day test. Yeah, I suppose it'd be the way to do it.
Yeah.
I think that they say for some reason either Friday to Sunday. Maybe they just forgot it was a bank holiday. Sometimes I do that. But yeah, it was bad. Any mitigating circumstances where
I was looking at it,
a bit of football starting, but it's not normally an issue.
The tickets weren't ridiculously expensive. I know there've been lots of fair complaints about pricings in London, but the ticket pricing weren't that high for it. I mean, I wonder if it's a consequence of Old Trafford has actually just had a lot of Test cricket in the last few years. So they had a 2019 Ashes Test match, COVID obviously in 2020. They were supposed to have a Test match against India that was called off last minute in 21. 22, they had South Africa. 23 Ashes Tests. 24 Sri Lanka and 25 India. So I wonder if there's a bit of fatigue there, especially being sandwiched between the 2 most high-profile home tours. I don't know.
But being very generous for the party stand in particular, clashing with Leeds Festival, I don't know, up there. That's a big weekend for the teenagers just got their results and that sort of thing. If they might have been there for a drink,
from having been in the party stand once before, I don't think there's a lot of overlap between people who go to that festival.
But I guess that also it was weird that the weather was actually as okay as it was. Like when you see that there's like a storm with a name on it and it's Manchester, and you think like, okay, well this test is just destined to be a washout. And then so maybe that as well, a bit of uncertainty around the weather keeps people away. But look, on the whole, not a great look. But I think London tests in particular seem to draw slightly better crowd, so I think we might be okay for the next 2.
Anyway, time for Mark Butcher to share his thoughts on the test match. Butch, Jamie Smith's really good, isn't he?
Yeah, he sure is. What a start to a Test career! It's just the most extraordinary thing about it, I guess, is just how comfortable he's looked in all aspects, really. Whether that be sort of media-wise, the work behind the stumps, which by and large, there's been very little to complain about or to sort of notice as an obvious weakness. And obviously with the bat, it's just fantastic. I mean, technically incredibly sound. All of the modern power that you could wish for. Has a real super strength in terms of bowlers missing their length slightly short and disappearing over mid wicket. It's been an epic start from the young man. Chappelli was right all those years ago when he picked him out from club cricket in eastern suburbs in Sydney, and I thought he was talking about Popey, but he was talking about James Smith as a sort of like a future England player. He spotted a good one.
Yeah, it's amazing how unflustered he seems. He seems very comfortable in his own game. He's very willing to sort of endure periods where the rate of scoring goes down a little bit, and then very happy to pick it up. Out of basically everyone in that squad, he's the one who probably parks away the crazy shot. A lot of talk about England going too hard before this summer. Smith, actually, he's got a very natural tempo where he scores at around about 70 runs per 100 balls.
Yeah, I mean, he's the right man for the moment, isn't he? Because England have talked about sort of tempering the worst or the maddest excesses of baseball, and in Smith they found somebody who's incredibly comfortable doing both. Both having the ability to kind of raise the tempo when required, but is more than happy to sit in and soak up some pressure. Has a really sound defence. Yeah, I mean, look, he'll have sterner tests in terms of bowling attacks to run into, but in him now they have somebody that is more than comfortable batting at six. Would probably be more than comfortable batting higher, but hopefully we can hold that chat off for a while, particularly while he's keeping. But if such an occasion were to come whereby, it was necessary for him to maybe bat higher and for them to have somebody else keep wicket, then you wouldn't have an issue with that either. So, it's a terrific start. Trying not to get too carried away, but it's rare that you see anybody come into the Test side, even Root and Cook, who started with a century in his first ever Test match, just looks so absolutely to the manner born, as though he's been doing it forever.
He's obviously a young man still. He's only recently just turned 24, but how much of a difference does it make, even for a young player coming to a more stable side? I compare him to someone like Ollie Pope or Zach Crawley, who they came into England sides where there were changes all the time. There weren't that many guys in the county championship scoring loads of runs, so players were picked for potential very, very early in their careers, and they were sort of developing under the gaze of Sky cameras and all that third man analyses, whereas Smith has come into it after 2 or 3 years of really heavy run scoring, and is a man who seems very comfortable in his own skin.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of proves that having a record of scoring a lot of runs is helpful. as much as kind of in recent times, people's first class records perhaps haven't carried as much weight in terms of their subsequent selection as in the past, but it certainly helps that you have somebody that kind of has is dominant and can be dominant in the level below when they go up. But you can sort of search around for reasons. I think you just have to give the young man a hell of a lot of credit for being very talented, but also being mature beyond his years in terms of the application of that talent. And I think that's where the real excitement comes from, is that mentally he just seems to be completely and utterly sort of in tune with what he's doing, and the environment wherever you put him doesn't seem to change that. There's no discernible sort of jitters or changes to what he's not trying to become a different type of player or play in a way that you feel that a Test match player might play straight out of county cricket. He's kind of gone in there and has has just looked incredibly comfortable. I mean, unnervingly so.
Sri Lanka were pretty close to feeling like they were on top of the game, gave England a couple of scares on the final day, and they did that despite losing 5 new ball wickets up top across the 2 innings and enduring some sloppy periods in the field. You were quite vocal about one particular period of sloppiness.
Well, yeah, I mean, from the point of view that there really isn't any excuse for kind of not knowing, not having all 11 players knowing exactly what should be happening on that particular morning. 22 runs was the difference between the two teams on the third morning. The game was right in the balance. Sri Lanka had given themselves an incredible chance, from being 6 for 3. Of actually kind of being able to keep a deficit down to something a little bit more manageable than the 1-2-3 I think that it ended up being, and putting England under some real pressure in that final innings. I mean, they were under pressure as it was, but you just imagine if they'd only been 70 behind or something in the first innings as opposed to 120, and that would have made all the difference. And it's, we said it at the time that session would probably cost them the match, and it did. But the good thing is, if you look forward, is that having lost all of those early wickets in both innings, and then seeing the way that the competence, the skill, the courage, sort of the batting order later on, you can imagine the situation whereby if they weren't sort of 3 down in the blink of an eye, that they could be extremely competitive. Batting wise, technically they're very, very good. I thought Kamindu was superb. That Rathnayaka, I think, had a really good game with bat and ball, and probably should have been entrusted a bit more to bowl more than Dhananjaya gave him, particularly in that last innings. Karunaratne looks like a really good player at the top of the order. They've got really good batters all the way through, and so they shouldn't be a pushover, as they proved in the Test match, as perhaps the West Indies were at times with the bat. And that gives them a real opportunity. And and the reason that I went so hard on it was because there just isn't an excuse for that. Anybody can get bowled out for nothing, or can drop catches or whatever it might be. But kind of like for a team from the get go, kind of be completely at sea as to what was going on, or at least that's the way that it appeared. In a situation in a game where you're right in it, was kind of inexcusable to me.
England struggled to be incisive without Mark Wood on that fourth morning. Wood's been ruled out for the rest of the series. But England have called up 20-year-old left-arm giant Josh Hull, first-class average of 58. You can't have seen much of him because, other than his own family members, really, no one's really seen much of him. What do you make of that call up? It's very Bazball. They've had a few out there selections over the last couple of years. This is right up there.
Yeah, it is, but it isn't. I've seen a bit of Josh Hull, and he kind of ticks all the boxes for what they want. And I think I mentioned at some point during the broadcast over the week that the great thing that England have done is they've identified things that they need, or things that they feel are going to be successful, i.e., whether that be height from the spinner, whether that be extra pace, although Mark Wood was already there, but that is that's a cornerstone of what they want in their attack. And so they've looked around and they found somebody that is not only a giant but also offers a bit of pace, offers them a different angle. And on this occasion, they're kind of willing to forego sort of a paucity in first class statistics to plug in somebody who fits the mold of what they want the team to look like, or the role that they want somebody to be able to fulfill. Now, he's unlikely to play in the Test match. He's there as cover for the rest of the bowlers. There was a bit of a worry, I thought, over Chris Woakes. He made a diving stop down on the field and in the boggy part of the field at the Brian Statham end, and sort of got up holding at the front of his left groin, and that seemed to be bothering him when he was batting. So there is a little bit of a concern about not only Wood, obviously, who's out, but also the rest of the bowling attack. But Hull is there as a sort of like as a replacement for the pace of Wood. And then Potts, I think Potts showed enough second innings in particular. I mean, he's more in tune to being a sort of a new ball bowler than he is an old ball bowler. So you've got replacements for the type of bowler that is going to fulfil the type of role that they want. So I was fully expecting them to name him, to be honest. I mean, John Turner was the other one, as a like for replacement. I mean, there isn't a 95 miles an hour bowler out there, but somebody who's between 85 and 90 as opposed to 80 and 85, and Hull fits that bill.
Off the TV, it looked like there were lots of empty seats at Old Trafford over the week. A Wednesday start before a bank holiday weekend can't have helped. I'm sort of wondering, I know that you got 3 back-to-back test matches, but aren't you better off? What is wrong with one of the test match starting on a weekend, on a Saturday, just to ensure you get 2 days of weekend cricket? Because 3 days, especially with this England side who get tests done pretty quickly, it's a shame that game wasn't held more on the weekend.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there were lots of things at play at Manchester. Weather was atrocious. I mean, it was cold. It felt like autumn, which wouldn't have helped. You had the 2 Manchester teams playing football in the Premier League on Saturday. The crowd was pretty good. I thought Friday it was probably the best, I think. And sort of, the howling winds, the whole thing. It wasn't particularly pleasant for spectators. But you're right. I mean, the Lord's Test is always going to start on a Thursday. Tradition dictates that's the case. The Oval Test match will start on a Friday, so you will get the full weekend in there in September. But then you also have to look at sort of the other factor, which is, the not the most glamorous opposition, which is not to denigrate them in any way, shape, or form. But I'm guessing that this late stage of the holidays, with people taking their last summer break or their only summer break before the kids go back to school, it was going to be a tough sell. I think the 2 London ones will be packed out, as you would expect. But it was a tough week for Old Trafford and for Lancashire County Cricket Club for all of those factors.
More broadly, the ECB have released the schedule for 2025, the international schedule. It looks very similar to what we saw last summer with the India series, 5 test matches there. The last one starts at the very end of July, I think a couple of days in August, and that's it for the test summer. Are you broadly okay with that? A lot of people really don't like that there's so little test cricket in August. I know we've got a decent chunk of test cricket in August this summer.
Yeah. I mean, no, I'm not okay with that. But what I do think is that, in much the same way as it was with the Ashes, that the opposition will ensure that in the ground there will be an enormous amount of support throughout the 5 test match series. And for that reason, it's difficult to sort of complain if you're filling the grounds up and selling the tickets. Then it's what do you do? I mean, it's not that there's no real argument, except for the fact that I remember at the end of the Oval Test match for the Ashes and sort of thinking, geez, there's a hell of a lot. There's more than half of the summer left to go yet, or half the summer left to go, and it does feel as though the whole thing has come to a conclusion. I mean, that and this is speaking from me being a kid. The cricket season was kind of over after the Oval Test match, and of course we know that after the last test against India, there'll be 100. There'll be one day stuff going on in September, but you can't help but feeling that it makes it feel as though the summer is even shorter than it is anyway by finishing in July. But those decisions are taken way above my pay grade, and I think that when they point to sort of ticket sales and the amount of engagement in over the course of those test matches, they'll be right up there with the Ashes again because it's India. So, the ends will justify the means, I think, to them.
Well, not too long till the Lord's Test, Butch. Interesting to see how that one goes. Cheers for your time. Catch you next week. Before we continue, a reminder that we're only 2.5 weeks away from our first ever non-London live show. The whole gang, including Butch, will be there, and we're only a few days away from announcing an extra special guest as well. It's at Hockley Social Club in Birmingham on September the 12th. Tickets are just £15, and if the last few live shows are anything to go by, it's sure to be an awesome evening. So come along, get your friends and family to come along, get your club teammates there, and have a great night with us. Mark Wood has been ruled out of the series, and rather sensationally, England have called up 20-year-old Leicestershire seamer Josh Hull, who averages 58 with the ball in first-class cricket. Why have they picked him? James asks, is the selection of Josh Hull a little unfair to many with far better wicket totals and averages on the county circuit? Phil?
Is it unfair on others? I wouldn't go that far. Is it surprising? No. Is it objectively ridiculous? Possibly. But those numbers are just so last year, mate. So it's done. Runs, wickets, averages, strike rates. No. They're not the metrics. They're not the metrics anymore. 58, make it 78, make it 108. Doesn't matter. This kid is about 8.5 feet tall. He bowls fast, and he's got a big, strong left arm. That's why he's playing. I asked someone earlier today, actually, if there's been any precedent in English cricket history for a player of these physical characteristics. I don't think there has been.
Reece Topley is probably the closest one.
Sorry, as a Test cricketer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Topley undoubtedly is a good shout, but as a Test cricketer, Topley's never played Test cricket.
Yeah.
I don't think England have ever had a tall left armer who bowls fast, ever.
I think he's going to play.
Yeah, I think so.
So do I. Ollie Stone struggled. Has struggled a bit with red ball and struggled when he went back to Notts. I think he's going to play.
So it's Josh Hull, to be fair, but yeah.
Well, no.
Yeah, sure. I'm totally contradicting myself.
Well, no, it isn't. Josh Hull has had a better recent first class outing than Ollie Stone by a factor of 10.
Yeah, he was.
Ollie Stone played this week for against Durham and went at fives as Durham scored millions.
Didn't Hull go at fives as well this week?
Pardon?
Didn't Hull go at fives as well this week?
But he picked up.
He took five against the Lions.
He took five. He took five for not that many against Sri Lanka, and the same Sri Lanka top 7 that England are playing in the second and third Test matches. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it looks slightly absurd, but we've talked about the tactical shift in England's makeup of the bowling attack this summer. They started the 2023 Test summer with Robinson, Broad, Anderson, 3 seamers who bowl low 80s at best. This summer, they've moved away from that. They retired Anderson. Woakes is the only person who's anywhere near that profile. They've looked for bowlers who can create problems for batters when it's flat. Mm-hmm. And pitches have been flat. So they're looking for guys who are different to the profiles of bowlers who typically finish up top in the wicket-taking charts in the Championship. And history tells us that 6 foot, 79 mile per hour right-arm seamers don't take wickets in Pakistan, in Australia. So I understand why England are looking for anyone who fits those categories.
Yeah, and I think also weirdly the injury to Stokes makes it slightly easier to pick a total wild card in your attack because of how England have chosen to rebalance the side. You have 4 so you have bowlers you can plug in more. Like Potts is going to bowl more overs than Stokes would if he were in the team, which means that you can have a guy who bowls 4 overs a session and that's it. And you tell him to go out there and bowl as quickly as possible. I think he's going to play as well. It's the kind of mad thing they would do. I also look. I sort of get if you're Sam Cook or whoever else that you might feel a bit sort of downhearted in this, but I don't buy the argument really that it's disrespecting the county championship. I mean, for one thing, the job of the people selecting the England team is to pick the team that they think is best suited to the needs of the England Test team. They kind of. They don't owe. It's not it's not a badge of recognition. It's not a well done award for county championship. The thing that you get for bowling well in the county championship, which should be its own award,
the county championship,
exactly, which is a brilliant trophy to win, and is one of the the oldest cups in sport. So that's there are other ways in which the ECB has disrespected the county championship, and some of those things mean that you can't select on county championship form as easily these days. But I don't think that they have any, obligation to just go down the charts of the top wicket takers or top run scorers and just pick those guys, because that's not what their job is.
Yeah.
And look, Mark Wood is incomparable, but what he does offer is short, sharp, staccato bursts of difference, of otherness. He does it with extreme pace. Josh Hull will do it with extreme angles and pace as well. And so why not, as Ben says, they're playing 5 bowlers, right? They're playing Woakes at 7. So why not? It makes good sense, right? To just take a look at the kid, and if he's not ready, then fine. You haven't really lost out too much. You can go into that game with 5 seamers or a 5-man attack and barely use him if it doesn't quite work. If he goes 6 overs for 40, then so be it, and you can bring him back later in the piece or even in the following innings.
Completely, I think it's completely different him debuting as a 4-seamer to a 3rd seamer. And I guess what is a fair question to ask is England are picking Hull and they pick Stone sort of one eye on more than one eye on future tours, and it's not just Australia, it's tours like Pakistan. I think it's fair to ask, well, actually, is this still the best configuration for a home series, even though the pitch has been flat? Woakes has been your best bowler in the last 3 test matches, probably. Is someone similar to Woakes probably the best way to go? I think that's a fair question to ask, and maybe someone like a Sam Cook or even Ollie Robinson, who's completely dropped off the radar. You'd expect both of those guys to go very well, even on flatter home pitches. They're just very good with the Duke's ball.
Yeah, but that's not unique to this England management. I think England have they've never picked. I think if you look at how India pick teams at home, so say someone like Akshar Patel, they know is never going to play a test in England or in Australia. But they pick him because he can make sure they win games at home, and that's fine. England they've always picked with one eye on overseas, and to some degree, I think that's partly why they're not the dominant home side that India and Australia are. But that's kind of been the way throughout, England's modern history, rather than just under Stokes and McCullum. I think the other thing with Hull in particular, it's slightly different with Stone, but with Hull in particular, and talking about the Ashes, they look at him and think this is a guy with the raw materials to win us a game of Test cricket in Australia. But also, because of how raw he is, it's going to be touch and go if he is ready at that point. So we need to kind of accelerate his development, basically. I think that's the other thing. We need to kind of see if we can press the fast forward on this guy, get him in under the England coaches, get him in talking to Brendan McCullum, Ben Stokes, get him to kind of to figure it out. And the way that's most likely to happen is if he's in an England Test squad and possibly a Test 11.
And a caveat for both Stone and Hull being expensive in the last round of fixtures is that counties aren't really set up to best use these sort of bowlers, because how a Stone or a Hull will be used for England is in those sharp, short bursts of 4 overs at a time maximum. Counties don't have the resources to use them like that. So these guys are used to bowl long spells. They're not bowling as quickly as they possibly can do. So I think it's exactly right. If they think of him as someone who could play a role in a series in 18 months' time, or even on the Pakistan tour, use him like he would be used on those tours, because counties actually can't really do that. Which is one of the reasons why I think Atkinson, his development in the last 2 years has been pretty smooth, is that he plays for Surrey, and Surrey are pretty much the only county that can use someone like that and rest them and not overbowl them, etc., etc.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Woakes, been the best bowler of the last 3 or 4 weeks for England. And, well, in Yaz's opinion.
Yeah, I'd go Atkinson, but yeah.
Sure. I'm not arguing that one way or the other, but he's certainly been a presence. And his continued presence in the side is interesting, right? In this era now of looking for release points and all the rest of it, and talking almost obsessively about 16 months from now and Australia. Well, Woakes was asked last week how he sees his future and the prospect of overseas Test matches, and it seems like a year is a long time in cricket, right? Because he sat in those stands at the Oval, literally this time last year, post Ashes, big contented smile on his face, and I asked him about it, and he says, "Well, no, it's not going to happen, and I've got to be realistic, and I'm certainly not going to be." You know
what the line was, Phil?
Go on.
My overseas record speaks for itself.
Yeah, and he said, "Me and the Kookaburra just don't get on." He said, "I've tried everything, and we don't get on." Well, what's happened in the ensuing 12 months is a couple of things. I think, and I haven't spoken to him about this, but my guess is that he's seen Anderson go. Well, he's seen Broad go first of his own volition. He's seen Anderson go less so of his own volition, but he's seen them both go, and he has become seen. He's now seen as the attack leader, the daddy of the attack.
He quite likes it, doesn't he?
And I think he quite likes it.
Yeah.
And there must be a sense of not just vindication for having stuck at it and building up such a great record overall, but of being the main man. It must be quite gratifying to be wanted like this. And he keeps being asked these questions. He was asked about the Ashes a few weeks ago, and he says, "Well, you never know. You never know now." And when he was asked specifically about New Zealand and Pakistan, he said, "Well, yeah, I want to go. I want to go this winter." So there has been a change in mindset. The other thing I wanted to add on this, I think it might be the phenomenon, and I defer to you, Ben, on this, but the wobble seam phenomenon correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seemed like it extended Anderson and Broad's careers. It certainly gave them a new added dimension in those autumnal years of their careers. And while the pace declined a touch in both of them, they weren't quite as nippy as they were in their pomp, the wobble seam gave them an extra bit of oomph. And I wonder if Woakes, who is now a master of cut and wobble just as much as he was a conventional master of swing and seam back in the old days when he was coming through, I reckon the added element of these new skills has perhaps just convinced him that he might yet still have something to say in overseas conditions.
Chris Woakes player of the series in the away Ashes would be maybe my favourite thing that would ever happen in cricket.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
So I get that. I think that could happen. I can also see how he goes as a useful squad player as well, because the thing is, we've had a reminder of it now. It's remarkable that Stokes managed to play
a very good point, by the way.
all 22 tests or whatever it was since he took over as captain. But Stokes is an injury-prone cricketer. So looking near term in Pakistan, that's when Stokes is targeting for a return. But if he doesn't make it, England are going to face a question of how to balance the side, and Woakes is a useful answer to that. And then also it's Australia in particular, I think, because as a batter, it's the short ball that he struggles with, and that's what the test will be there. And I think his thing as a bowler, I think the skill, he adds skills. The wobble seam has come more into it. Interestingly,
he seems like he seems like a more complete bowler now. I think the white ball requirements has helped him develop as well.
Well, I think if anything, actually, in some ways, it's the accuracy that's improved. I think he's always been actually quite an attacking bowler in England. Like he goes quite full, so he's actually always gone for. He's rarely been had the Anderson economy. I think those comparisons have actually missed the mark a bit. But he's had the skill that he means in England. He always takes wickets, but overseas, if you building pressure is how he kind of needs to take wickets sometimes as a seamer, and that's been what Woakes has struggled with a bit. But I think that accuracy has improved a bit as well. So, and as Anderson showed, even in conditions where there's nothing going for you as a seamer, if you can go at in some case, in Anderson's case, 1 and over, but 2 and over or whatever, then actually eventually you'll get a breakthrough, and your average will come out of the series looking good. And if the team's constructed right, you can be an asset to your team. So I think that's almost the thing for Woakes as well. Like the skills in England will always keep you in the game because the ball will always help you. Overseas, you can have all the skills at times, and there can be nothing you can do because of what the pitches and the balls might be like. But if you're accurate enough, then you can do it, and that's where I think Woakes has improved. Has he improved enough? I'm not sure, but I would, if I were a betting man, I would lean towards him being in that Pakistan squad at this point.
Totally.
I think he'll be in the Pakistan squad. I mean, he in home. Also, you've got this massive India home series next summer. He is England's top 3 players in home tests in terms of port. This is a classic Woakes test. 3 for 32 in the first innings. A pretty important 25.
Takes England into the lead, right?
To take England into the lead. Crucial time in the game. Jamie Smith, really helps Jamie Smith along at the other end. And then 3 for 58 in the second inning. So he takes 6 wickets for not many in the game and a really crucial 25. Adds depth to England's batting. His record in home tests, 130 wickets at 21. He has
against Anderson's at 24.
Against Anderson at 24, Broad at 26. He now has more home wickets than Hoggard, Goff, Caddick, Swan, 3 off Harmison, Rana as well. He's got in his sights. He presuming he plays at least one other home summer after this, he's going to end up in the top 5 or 6 home wicket takers for England. That's an extraordinary record, and I think we're guilty of it as anyone else is, but we keep banging on about the Ashes. But he's so good at home, and England have got this series against India next summer that they are maybe just favourites for, but not overwhelming favourites for. And Woakes, if England do well in that series, Woakes can be a huge part of it. Anyway, enough on Woakes. Ben, Bangladesh have beaten Pakistan for the first time ever in a test match, an extraordinary test match. Mushfiqur scored millions of runs. He's been remarkably consistent for a number of years now. Mahedi took 4th inning or 3rd innings wickets rather to prompt the Pakistan collapse. Kind of mad game because Pakistan were the architects of their own downfall in many ways too. Yeah,
I don't know whether to start with Bangladesh.
Go Bangladesh.
Let's start with Bangladesh, and especially Mushfiqur Rahim, actually, who I think if you asked the random man on the street who's Bangladesh's best ever test batter, they would maybe give you a puzzled look. But if you asked you're in the know cricket fan, they'd go either Tamim Iqbal or Shakib Al Hasan. You've got, Tamim arrived in such scintillating style as a teenager at Lords with that 100, and then Shakib is one of the game's great all-rounders. But actually, Mushfiqur has just got better and better and better through his career, to the point where now his record is better than anyone's. He's their leading Test run scorer. He'll be the first Bangladesh batter to 6,000 Test runs. He's the only Bangladesh batter who averages 39. You've got 3 in the 38s, those two, and Mominul Haq. And actually, when you say he's got better and better and better since the start of 2020, when you think he would have been 33, 34 at that point, you think he'd be winding down. Since then, he's got, I think, about 1,600 Test runs at an average of 55. The only player in the world with more runs at a better average in that time is Kane Williamson. Wow. And there's only 3 players who are in the 1,000 run club in that time who have better average, or 3 others, which is Saud Shakil and then Harry Brook and Yashasvi Jaiswal. So he is actually right up there. And okay, you can look in there. Obviously, I'm not saying he's one of the all-time greats, but for Bangladesh, I think actually he has carved out a career which has him. That's the Mount Rushmore. Is those 3 now? Is him,
fourth?
Ready to be carved, I guess. It's your three piece about Mount Rushmore. Habibul. Oh, that would be nice.
Mominul.
Mominul's good.
He's got a very good record.
I think he will end up breaking all records. He's the other one in that.
Don't you want to say nominal every single time?
Nominal. Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah. So that was.
So that's good. We've covered.
Yes.
Bangladesh. Everyone loves not everyone loves a Pakistan screw up, but
it is fun.
Everyone other than Pakistan does enjoy it just a little bit.
And I was going to say from start to finish, but actually it was from 3 days out from the start that it all started to go wrong. So a way out from the start of the Test match, they release Abrar Ahmed, the only specialist spinner in their squad, and put in the media release, it's because we want to pick an all-pace attack. And it's like, okay, it's a useful bit of information to give to Bangladesh. And, we've all made the mistake of looking at a pitch, 3 days out when it's green and being like, oh, look, it's going to be another green seam in England. And then you come to the first day and it's actually, they cut all that grass off. But they picked the team for the conditions that they thought they were going to get and not the conditions that they did get. So that was the one thing, no spinner. Then, with a bit of rain on the first day, so they batted about 4 sessions, I think. They got to 448 for 6 after an early wobble. Mohammad Rizwan going like an absolute dream, 171 not out. Shaheen is, he's doing his T20 finishes thing.
He pulls them out.
Yeah, exactly. You think, there is going to be no easier time in the Test to score runs than right now. That's one thing. 2, that's not a bat once total there. 448, like maybe you skill them for 200, but quite likely you're going to be batting it at some point in tougher conditions. 3, think about what Test cricket in Pakistan so often plays like. It's 550 plays 550, and then it accelerates to a finish on day 3. It's like a cycle sprint race in the Olympics, where you need to be in the exact right position for that final surge, and if you're not, you lose the game. And fair enough to misjudge the conditions, maybe, but you've been batting on the pitch for for a day and a half. At that point that it's not going to be a doddle to take wickets on this pitch. So that's 2. 3, they then just Bangladesh make 560, fair play to them. It's late on day 4. You're not winning that game. You're not trailing by 110 with 4 sessions left in the game, less I think actually, and winning that. That's just not something that happens. And yet they throw the wickets away in a series of rash shots. They don't even score quickly. Weirdly, they just Shakil dances past one and swings his bat across the line. Babar and Shah Masood both throw their hands at it, and that's it. They're bowled out. The game's done. And I think kind of underpinning this, and you've actually seen that there's some quotes out there from Shah Masood and from Babar Azam before him, is they were the most thoroughly basballed of any team, really. Obviously that New Zealand series was great, but New Zealand were in that game for large parts. Pakistan series, there were some close games, but that was the statement triumph of the Brendan McCullum, Ben Stokes era, and Pakistan were on the receiving end of it, and it has really, really hit home. You see, Shah Masood talking about wanting to play this aggressive brand of cricket, and actually you can always say that everything they've done in this Test is like something England would have done, but kind of more extreme. England love naming their team a day out. They've done it like 3 days out, basically. England love a declaration with a batter, passes 100 and cruising. That's exactly what this was, but with, without the added thing of getting a bit of new ball under lights or whatever. And England love a bad shot, and there were plenty of them in this game. And I guess the other thing as well is that the players they're not going forward. I think and there's been a lot going on in Pakistan cricket. There was a time, I think, when Babar in particular had sort of created a bit of a bubble around that team, even though it's always sort of a febrile atmosphere outside of it. He'd kind of insulated the team from it a bit. And that's been pierced with, sackings at the top and changes of captaincy frequently. And now it's kind of all just fraying a bit. There was a video of Shah Massoud and Jason Gillespie having a bit of a heated discussion in the dressing room, and the form of the players is struggling. When Shaheen came through, you thought, here is, an all-format superstar. He's still a very good bowler, but he has not developed into one of the like a World 11 type fast bowler. And Babar is going through a rut in Test cricket. At a point when he should be at his peak, and his average has dropped from north of 50 to around 45 now, and he's got a duck in this Test, and then plays a bad shot in the second innings. And it's 9 Tests in a row at home without a win now. And if it goes to 10, then they'll have lost a Test series to Bangladesh. And, given that this is Pakistan cricket, who knows what that could mean for various people's jobs and
we do
positions and that
know
sort of thing.
what that means for Shah Massoud's captain. Yeah, I mean, that declaration was sort of insane, I think. They talk about following the England model, but England in Rawalpindi scored 600. Here they quit when they were going really, really quickly with Rizwan and Afridi at the crease. So yeah, not a good result for Pakistan. That is everything for today's show. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Ben. Cheers, listeners. We'll be back later in the week for our Women's Cricket Weekly episode.